there were quite a new number of things. Woohoo! We're live! Yay! There we go. After sort of slight mishap on trying to press the live button, we are live. It's been a long time, guys. I wonder whether anybody's missed us. It's been quiet probably for the last couple of months for people. But how are we? How is the world?
Yeah, really well. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I mean, the summer has been outstanding, and it's where I live. When you get good weather, it is pure paradise. It's just lovely. And yeah, it's been an interesting growing season this year because all the stuff has gone like, what is this big yellow thing constantly in the sky? So all my early planted turnips just went to seed. They were like, oh, this is great. We love this seed. I was like, no, where was my root? But apart from that, yeah, it's been glorious and really nice. And I had a bit of time off in July. And where were you two in August? LinkedIn was like a ghost town.
Well, yeah.
Sometimes you got to get away.
Camping, weren't you?
Yeah, I went camping and then I kind of retired from LinkedIn. I just couldn't go back on. I just was like, oh, you know what? I was enjoying the mental freedom of not doing it, of not being there, of not responding. And I was just like, you know what? If I'm not there for a couple more weeks, hey, what of it? Like I had work lined up, so I said I was just going to leave it for a little while. And I enjoyed that piece. And it also meant I wasn't on my phone as much. And you weren't thinking, oh God, I have to get a post together for tomorrow. Oh God, I never went back in there and checked the comments and stuff. And even since I've come back, like even today, I had half an hour out this morning and I've been away for the entire day. And just now I went back to the post I put on this morning. I'm like, okay, well, it's important, but not as much of a priority because I learned the value in not making it a priority. I'm trying to maintain that.
Yeah, imagine it. You got a lot of mental space freed up.
That's it. And I think it's interesting because the first question you asked there, Laura, was how is the world? And I was like, oh God, I can't answer that. Like the world. And then thankfully, Dan, you answered about your world. Like, okay, that's okay. That's good. That's how you.
I like talking about me, Mark.
the ego taking over. But so I think, and I think that's a challenge. We do need a lot more mental space in the world because it's hard to find. It is hard to find.
I think that's just it. And I you and me very similar. I think I wrote a couple of posts at the beginning of August, and then I was like, no, I said I was taking some downtime. I'm not sure I necessarily had downtime. It was just my focus was elsewhere because there was so many things going on that just needed my full presence to be focused on it, and I just couldn't think about. What's the next post? Me jumping in and doing this, and to be fair, when I was back working in a different, life mark one, as it were, we always used to say, forget August because actually most of Europe just disappears because it's too hot. So I kind of took a reminder of that theme. But I'm with you, Mark. I kind of, I had all the great intentions. I'd even kind of mapped out vaguely what I was going to write on the 1st of September. And I just thought, you know what? I'm not ready. So
good to have a reset.
I limped back into LinkedIn. I think it's probably what I would say.
And because the two of you walked away like that and you went, oh, the world hasn't stopped.
Exactly.
I didn't go on LinkedIn today and yet everything's okay.
Yeah. I think that's the thing though, Dan, is that the irony for me is that I've stepped back in. I think I posted twice last week. And my newsletter on Friday, and my impressions within those three posts are back where they were back at the beginning of August. And so you kind of like go, why was I putting myself so much pressure to be there?
It seems like the algorithm's changed actually, and it doesn't reward you being on the platform a lot. That's not, it used to, if you were on there a lot and engaging a lot and lots of people engaging with you, it used to reward you for that. It doesn't seem to do that anymore. So actually you could probably post just 2 or 3 times a week and still get the same sort of eyes on your content.
Oh no, absolutely. But that leads beautifully onto today's subject: how to be quiet bravery and how to lead with quiet bravery and to be ourselves in a world that wants to ultimately make us into something else because it's so noisy, telling us what we should and shouldn't be, etc., etc. And actually, what we've just been talking about is, actually finding our own rhythm that works for us. That is not being drawn into the noise, because it's so easy to be drawn into the noise of, the algorithm and what everybody else is doing, and that we need to show up every day because otherwise we're failing, or something might happen, the world might implode. And actually, we've just proved that actually if we find our own rhythm, actually, which for me personally, is much quieter than posting daily. First 2 hours in the morning where I just feel like I get off the first 2 hours and I'm like this for the rest of the day. So for me it's definitely that. But it's, I think that's the piece. But how can we keep stepping forward into that space? And the thing is that so often we equate, being brave and bold by being effectively in your face and being present the whole time. But actually, is that necessarily what's required?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, Laura? Because when you look at the title, and I know this is what Mark always does when we get together, right? So I thought I'm going to get in front of him and do this before he can. So quiet and
no
brave.
Competition at all.
It's those two words, and they're very important, Laura. Quiet and bravery, right? Because actually, they're the sort of words that can mean different things to different people, right? And you made the point that we live in a very noisy world now. We've got noise coming at us from all directions. That everything's alive and awake 24/7. We want everything now. We've got so many devices and so many ways that we can input stuff into us all the time. So it feels like if we want to be a leader and we want to be seen and heard, because to lead we've got to be seen and heard, you kind of naturally think, I need to be loud, I need to be out there, I need to be amongst this noise and getting heard amongst this noise. But actually the brave thing to do, which is the other word in the title there, is shut the F up for a bit. And the successful 21st century leader is seen and heard by listening. And I know that seems like a paradox, right? But that's how you're brave these days, by not joining in with the noise, by zooming out and by listening, by demonstrating to people that you care. If you're going to lead, you need to care about people, because people don't care what you know unless they know that you care. Mm-hmm. So for me, leading with quiet bravery is about listening, is about understanding. And the bravery is the not joining in with the noise, not following the crowd. We live in a world at the moment that's incredibly divided. We have two really competing worldviews, and everything and every debate is always kind of positioned as them and us all the time. And you see a lot of conversations on social media, and people interacting with me, we make assumptions that I'm either them or us. And I think to myself, wow, a world that we live in. And the quiet bravery is to not join in with that, and to not be them and us, to be we.
No, I'm totally with you, Dan. It's really, there's so many things kind of rushing through my head there, and what you're saying, just through some things that have happened in the last week with me. And there was one particular situation where never met this person, but we've exchanged messages via WhatsApp, and the response was, people like you need to get out of their sleepy hollow and start fighting for what's right. People are living in fear. And I'm just going, I hear you, but that's not the line I take. It's because actually I believe, for me personally, we have greater impact when, and I'm going to use this phrase, we build better ears to listen to people and truly understand what is going on and hear the different perspectives. And that's what we're not seeing enough of right now. And absolutely with you, Dan, in that whole thing of being able to sit in the discomfort of the noise around you, because it's very easy to get drawn into that, but still be present sufficiently that you're going to listen, where you can actually respond because you've built better ears. But unfortunately, at the moment, there is quite a lot of reactionary responses. And, you know, we're being brave because we're doing this. And that's really hard. I mean, I chair the independent advisory group to Kent Police, and you know, one of the hardest things I've had to do is listen to the noise from the very start, when there was, well, it needs to look like this and look like that, and you know, I call it the hairdryer moment, where you kind of feel like you're being blasted, but to hold the ground, to hear all the voices, and still take steps forward. And yesterday at the quarterly meeting, somebody came up to me, one of the people who's been there probably since, you know, right since I took over the position, and she said, "Oh my God, Laura, you have done an amazing job, because you have taken on board all of these conflicting perspectives and you've created it into something that is meaningful for all of us. You have listened to us, we've contributed to something, and this is where we find ourselves." Is it perfect? No, I'm going to, you know, I'll be the first person to tell you, you know, I'm still learning stuff from them, and you know, every meeting is always interesting. There's always a new nuance. But for that, when I've got this sort of very, you know, hairdryer noise going on when we started, to being now them sort of going, God, you actually have listened. I feel that my opinion matters, and we're building something collectively together. That for me is I feel quite proud of being able to do that. I mean, it's been hard to sit with that noise and not to take it on board and say, I'm failing at this, and you know, gosh, why didn't I think of that? But you know, that's the world we find ourselves in, I think. I don't know. What's your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting in our modern world how loud it is. But I think one of the reasons why it's so loud is because nobody's listening, and we're all shouting above it and across each other. And that's why we're so loud. Like, you know, you saw the march that was in London last weekend, you know, and people draped in Union Jacks and, you know, make Britain great again. I don't know what the main slogan is of what the thinking is. And like, you know, we can sit there and go, oh, these are idiots, right? But how does that help? Who does that help? Like, are people shouting into the void because no one's listening and no one's actually explaining? And is the bravery in those spaces needed to listen to explain? A bit like your example there. Like, if people actually get heard, then they don't keep shouting because they know someone's listening. And therefore they can lower the voice until it becomes a conversation. And maybe the bravery is in putting yourself forward, go, okay, well, I'll listen. But we can get down a very deep rabbit hole into that space of whether will add value. But like, you know, it's like it's you know, if you are in any institution or any organization or any space where people aren't listened to, they get louder because they're not being listened to. And then if your style of being a leader is to shout them down and to get louder again, then it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the long run. It doesn't work at all to that end. Like, and so I think that need of, look, again, on that same point, right? And I was only thinking this today, because we all, and Dan alluded to it there, right? There is this idea that in our modern world, we need a different kind of leadership. We need a vulnerable kind of leadership. We need this kind of way to understand and to be, right? But yet, if I arrived on this planet today and I didn't know how our leadership structures worked, and I looked at the news, I would say, oh God, you've got very loud vocal leaders, and people obviously want that because they elect them, you know, and yet there's this people who want this kind of dictatorial kind of leadership, and it's kind of alarming to me that seems to be people kind of want to be told that what they believe is right and then told what to do on the back of that. is that really a good way to develop as people? Because then we don't grow and change ourselves, you know. So like, is the bravery, and the bravery is standing against that in some ways. Like, I think it's so complex, and I'd love to try and take it from the leadership point of view. I wonder how many leaders who are still dictatorial and didactic are still succeeding. In the right space, are they still succeeding? Because we see them in political spaces now quite frequently being loud and not brave. And like, it's not brave. Is it brave to shout stuff that's not true? Like, is that bravery, or is that opportunistic? I'm not sure anymore. Like, it would be brave to stand up and be opposite that. But like, I don't know where that goes. And I don't know. I know what kind of leader I'd like to be, but I don't think it's that kind of leader.
I hear you, and I think sometimes it is. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's a perception for some, and I'm not saying that this is, everybody, but I think there is a perception for some when somebody shouts loudly and is strong and firm in the way they come across. There are some who believe that they have all the answers, and there is a comfort, wrongly or rightly, in hearing that voice. But they kind of lost their sense of personal agency. And I think that's where it becomes dangerous, is because you then become, almost blinded to, there only being one truth in the world. So I'm with you, Mark. I'm not sure that's the leadership that's required in the world right now, because it's, so fragmented, it's so uncertain, it's so unpredictable. It almost has to be listened through in order to get out the other side, and that does require a different kind of leadership. And I wouldn't personally use the word vulnerable. I just would say it's actually being, building these better ears and really listening to what is really going on for people, and giving it time and space. And yet the thing is people aren't prepared to give time and space to others for that voice to come forward. And I think that's often that quiet bravery, is to stand in a space, firstly, and be prepared to listen to the noise, but also be prepared to listen to the silence as well, because I think that's incredibly hard. And I think a lot of people find it incredibly hard to sit with silence because they feel they have to step into it, and actually to collectively move forward. But of course, we're not taught at school like that. That's not, my favorite saying is that, we go to school, and by the time we're 11, it's sort of pretty much indoctrinated into us that the leader has all the answers, aka the teacher. If we follow the sequential steps, we'll get a gold star. Fantastic, brilliant, excellent, success will be ours. But then what happens when the path doesn't quite follow, and we don't have all the numbers, and we don't see it in quite the sequence that we thought it was meant to be? And that is what I think the places we are right now, and people haven't got different tools to be able to do that, because we're so used to and reliant on a leader who has all the answers. And being a leader who is prepared to be quiet, to listen, is quite different.
Just before you jump back in, Dan, can I just say, because that's what I'd written in front of me before you start speaking there, Laura. Like, is brave leadership admitting you don't have the answers?
Yeah, that's a very brave thing to do. And I'm with you, Laura, about the use of the word vulnerability. And I think actually probably what we mean here is integrity. Yeah. And I think this is what we're lacking amongst the noise and all the polarization. And, Mark said there, is it brave to stand up and tell lies? I think it is, actually. I think it is brave to do that. And what it always comes down to, and I often think back to this is not one for the kids, to Yes, Prime Minister, and Yes, Minister. I love that program. My dad had me watching it as a kid. And when Humphrey Appleby, the civil servant, used to say to Jim Hacker, the minister, when he was doing something stupid, he would say, "Oh, that's very brave, minister, very courageous." Because there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity. And, you know, telling lies, barefaced lies on a public platform is brave. In the same way as Humphrey Appleby would say to Jim Hacker, "That's very brave, minister." That is brave. But does it work? That's what it all comes down to, right? Yeah. You might mention it there about humans. We're here to evolve and grow. We want to move forward, don't we? We want to be better. That's how we're all driven. And right now, all this noise is actually just people trying to do that. You know, it might not be in a way that is very successful or lasting, and that's what we've got to say. What works, right? And what we know doesn't work from our lessons from the 20th century is command and control, top-down leadership. We've seen it works to an extent if we're allowing people to be exploited, and we're happy with that. But we're not now. As a culture, we're saying we're not happy with that anymore. We're not happy with the gap anymore. And the people that took to the streets of London and all that are people that haven't been heard for decades. And like Mark said, if you don't listen to people, they will keep shouting and shouting and shouting and shouting. And now they're on the street and they're covered in their flags and they've got something to say. And they're shouting and shouting because nobody has listened to them. Nobody's taken them seriously. They've been labelled as this, that, or the other, and we brush things under the carpet, or we've tried to put in policy to placate them. And you can't do that with people. You can't take whole groups of people and just marginalise them and don't listen to them. And when you can see how fragmented and divided the world is right now, it's clear that style of leadership, barefaced lying loudly, does not work. Yes, in the short term, it will win you some friends who are on your side. It will win you some votes. It will get you some power. But it doesn't work. It doesn't push humanity forward. It doesn't make the world a better place. It's not inclusive. It's not collaborative. It's not all the things we know in the 21st century work for human beings. And that's what it comes down to. And sadly, it doesn't in the modern world right now. It comes down to greed and people having to shout because nobody's listening.
Yeah, I think it's really, I hear what you were saying, Dan. I think the challenge is so many of these organisations, because over time they've chased problems to fix them. They've become very fragmented. So it's so complex to work in those organisations that actually they've lost sight of the very people they're there to serve, which is immensely difficult. But I'm not going to go down the political route, as suffice to say, because we could definitely go down a very, very, very deep rabbit hole. But I think for me, the point is around voices being heard, and how can you still stand strong and be honest. I even said yesterday in this meeting, look, I make no excuses for the fact that the way we're doing this has never been done before. We are literally laying the track as the train is right behind us. So I make no, but it's this meeting is only as good as the input that you give me along the way. And it's not me to do everything. But when I took on the role 18 months ago, the first meeting we had, 15 people in the room. We go around the room, not one person knew why they were there. Couldn't even speak for their community. And I'm thinking, holy CRAP, why am I here? What in God's name have I taken on? How on earth are we going to be able to, find this as meaningful? And then all it was a lot of noise, because they'd heard loads of stuff from the media, which, was so distant from the reality of what the district was about. But it was something for them to lash out on, to be able to, be frustrated with over where they were at. But from that to now, we have probably about 140 names, of which we had nearly 30 people in the room yesterday who are all actively part of the conversation. For me, that has come about by me just being honest. And in the moment, the tech went wrong, of course, because I went to press the volume and instead we got daytime TV. A little interlude, so we didn't quite get to our discussion section.
Women.
Well, hilariously, no one else could help me either to be able to get it back off daytime TV. So I didn't feel quite so bad there. But I think I know, and the reason I make the point is that I know that I can stand in that space and kind of laugh with them, because I think, and this is part of the quiet bravery for me, because I think I feel strong enough in myself to not get drawn into the noise and the embarrassment and all the rest of it. But I think if I go back about myself maybe 10, 12 years ago, had that happened, I might not have responded in quite, I might have gone, oh my God, this is terrible, oh, I've failed, and all the rest of it. And I think a lot, maybe not quite so dramatically, but inwardly, I think that's probably what a lot of people do and that impacts their ability to step into a space with quiet bravery, and lead in that way. Because you've got to trust yourself quite significantly to step into that space and to stand and be yourself when that's all that noise is going on.
That's powerfully put. And I love that you brought it back around to trust yourself, because I think that's, and rightly, like I use that authenticity, integrity is such a better word, because if you trust yourself and you're coming from an honest space, an integral space, well, then you're coming from the right space. You're not coming from an ego space or, an outcome focused space, you're coming from the right space. I spent yesterday giving a talk, fascinating few hours with priests in the diocese, and they are being challenged with a change of how they lead. I thought this was quite interesting for them, because I only have to give a small history of Ireland and the collapse of the Catholic Church in Ireland, where 30 years ago, these priests would have been lauded in society and had so much power and respect, and where they have zero now and they have no numbers at all. Like, there's so few of them. The average age was 72 years old in the room, which tells you an awful lot. And these are guys who have to learn new ways to work and new ways to lead. And it's a real challenge for them. And it has to be a quiet leadership, because they can't be loud anymore because of how society has changed around them and changed its perspective to them. And they know they can't be loud. They come out and say, well, people shouldn't live this way. They get shouted down. So they have to come at things from a very different approach. And they have to come at things from a very quiet way and lead, which is an interesting concept. I was trying to walk them through this idea of it and thinking it as I was preparing for this, right? We're used to that idea of leading from the front, and that idea of I'm in charge, this is what has to happen. But now it's also leading from the back. It's I'm in the room, I'm guiding what's happening, I'm listening to what's going on, but I'm leading from this space, and I'm allowing everyone else feel like they have an input and feel like they have control, and feel like, not control, but feel like they have a sense of agency in what we're trying to do. And I think that's really difficult if you're used to being in charge, which is where the guys were used to, especially as the older guys, used to being in charge, and now you have to switch and change that way of thinking. But there isn't another solution, because loud doesn't work anymore. And maybe as a microcosm for what we're talking about, that's a good example for how loud is no longer at work at all in a space. And it's only through the quiet leadership and through demonstrating how to lead. And some of the stuff we were working on was mindset, how you become solution focused as you're looking at the problems. And my point to them about why you need to do this is because if you're leading from the back of a room, you're leading in the room, you have to demonstrate how you want people to be in that space, how you want them to be solution focused. And it is that being in integrity, it has to be that demonstration of what we do. Like the example I gave when I was posting about this today was my father, right? And I didn't talk through the example specifically, but what I said was that he would do the hard thing, even though it would have personal repercussions. So to bring it to what it was a local community thing. One example of it, because he was always doing it, was like they had a game and they would have won. The other team was missing two of their best players on holiday, and they asked could they postpone the game. And for time immemorial, the team would go, oh, no way, why would we do that? What an opportunity. We're going to win. We're going to get the trophy. And he went, actually, it's not right that we play this game and your two best players aren't there. So no, we'll postpone the game. And then we lost the game. And he was vilified for doing it. But he said, like, it was the right thing to do, though. You know, if we had won because they were missing their best two players, had we won? And the other guys agree, of course we'd still won. Yes, to a point we'd still won, but not in the right way.
Yeah.
And that's the question. Like, so, and that's the space we have to go to. We shirk the hard decisions because the repercussions are personal.
Yeah.
And that's really, really difficult. And that's where the courage and the bravery really comes in. When the repercussions are personal, when we have to potentially suffer because we have to do the hard thing, well, then that's when we shy away from the bravery.
You couldn't have said a truer word, Mark. And I think that's the thing. That's the bravery and the courage comes when we recognise that there is a very real repercussion that could impact us, but we still step forward anyway. I think that is true brave leadership, where you honour that place.
You nailed it, Laura, with the word trust, and Mark picked up on it straight away. And what's the opposite to trust? I don't know that there is one, but perhaps it's fear, right? And a lot of leadership in the world today, in the corporate world as well as in the political world, comes from fear, and that leadership comes from fear because they don't trust themselves. Now, Mark's dad was able to make that courageous decision, which was absolutely the right thing to do. And anybody who's dispassionate and not involved in the them versus us of that fixture can see that's the right thing to do. Right? Of course, it's the right thing to do. We want the game to be fair, and we want the winner to have won on a fair playing field. But had Mark's dad not trusted himself and his inner guidance, because it was his inner guidance that told him that was the right thing to do. It wasn't anybody had educated him in that way. It was his conscience that told him that. But the trouble is, we get taught from a very early age not to trust our conscience, right? Some of my earliest memories come from being so confused about going, I know in my heart that was the right thing to do. And I'm now being told off for it, or blamed, or pilloried, or ridiculed for doing that. And so we get taught, right, the safe thing to do is to not trust this inner guidance and to play it small. Or what I learned was to shout louder, to have bravado, to have this false confidence, because I didn't trust myself. And I didn't want anybody to see that I couldn't trust myself. I didn't anybody to see how vulnerable I felt inside, because I was taught that was weakness. So I got on the front foot and became very loud and created this bravado and this persona. And to an extent, in some places, it helped me lead. I was always captain of the football team because I would happily organise people and talk and be loud. But now, in the 21st century, we've got to start trusting ourselves. We've got to get back to that inner guidance. And it's feeling that tells us that. And it is very brave to stand up in the face of a majority, and a loud majority, because your heart tells you to. It's very brave, but that's what we need right now.
No, the thing, when you're saying, you don't know what the opposite of trust is, I think the thing that was going through my mind when you... I think the thing that was going through my mind is, when we don't trust ourselves, it's because we don't feel safe, and safe with ourselves. I think is probably the first point of call, or we don't feel safe in the environment that we're in. And I think that's unfortunately where the world is quite significantly in that place of I don't feel safe right now. And that's where, again, we come back to this quiet, brave leadership piece. And I think the way you describe it, Mark, about being, sort of almost at the back of the room type thing, the back of the pack, I see that as kind of, that leader looking at the people within the group, kind of joining the dots, helping the understanding, helping them signpost between themselves, in order that as the leader, you are there to facilitate co-creation, collaboration, because that's actually the role of leaders today,
And
rather
to make
than
sure no one's left behind, Laura, isn't it? That's another thing. When you lead from the back like that, you get the better overview, and you make sure nobody's getting left behind. Because again, culturally as people, we have decided we don't want to leave people behind.
No.
Now, the way we're now delivering that, it doesn't appear to me to be working. But we know it doesn't suit all of humanity if someone gets left behind. You know, that's where crime and deprivation and all that stuff comes from, is people being left behind. And if you're leading from the back, and I might be wrong about this, but I think that's what wolves do, apparently, when they're on the move. The alpha, which we don't have in humans, by the way. So if anybody ever tells you we do that, that's rubbish. But the alpha wolf leads from the back. The young males, they're ploughing the furrow up the front. The wise alpha male is at the back.
I think that's, for me, is that all-seeing eye, that all-hearing ears. That's bad English, I give you that, but we know you get what I mean. Mark, you look like you're contemplating something there, quite profound.
It's a very interesting point. Like there's no alpha in the space, right? That we in human culture, right? And we tend to try and seek it. And like a little of what we're saying there, right, about the noise and the lack of noise, right? And people looking for answers, because we don't have answers. We tend to look now to the person who we think has answers. And we go, okay, great, you have answers. I like those answers. I take those answers.
Right, Mark? Especially if they're easy, and if they're easy answers, right? We go, oh yeah, we like that. A nice, easy, simple, popular answer.
Yeah, or they feed the fears we have, which is the easiest one of all. Like, oh, I attach that. Yes, I'm scared of that too. Let's be scared of that together. And it's easier to confront a fear if we are joined together. But just as easy, it's as easy to lead if we are joined together. It's the same thing. Confronting the fear of not succeeding. And like when you were talking about, the thing about bravery, right, and safety and the trust piece, to do something brave, we have to take a risk.
Yeah.
To do something brave, suddenly we're not safe anymore. And that safety can be putting our neck out there, can be making a statement that we know people aren't going to agree with. Or that safety can be as simple as we have to step out of our comfort zone. And like if we bring it right down to the micro, because we've been very much on the macro, we bring it back right down to the macro, and we talk about brave on an individual level. Like, if you realize that maybe you have an issue with drink, right? And maybe your entire friend culture is revolving around drink. It's a very brave thing to say, well, I'm not going to drink, because look, it, and in our culture, in this part of the world and in the UK as well, people will be saying, oh, what do you mean you're not drinking? What's wrong with you? Why are you not drinking? Right? And then suddenly that becomes a pressure. And then you're like, well, how do I find a life? How do I find a life outside of this? I know people who struggle to cut out, let's say, alcohol out of their life, because their life is built around it. I don't know what my life is going to look like outside of it. So it's easier to keep doing the thing that's not good for us than it is to take that brave step and try and create something new. And I know that's on a small level, it's a small example of it, but it requires the bravery to get out of the comfort zone. And all of the positive change we want to make, it means that we have to leave an old life behind. We have to leave something that we're so used to, that we wear like that old t-shirt that it's so comfortable every time you put it on. It's full of holes and it's just bits, and you had that example there during the week, I think, Dan, on one of your posts last week. Like, and but if we don't take it off and put on something new, then we're still going to be wearing that raggedy old t-shirt, and it's not good for us.
How will we ever know if we're going to like another one if we don't ever put it on?
Exactly. But we don't like the discomfort of not belonging and not fitting in and being different.
We're not
but you're right. It's like, how do we don't know what we don't know, and if we're only comfortable in our tatty t-shirt, then we're never going to know what a brand new, super duper one's going to. I mean, of course, they've got to wear the uniform that we're wearing this evening. Of course, that you don't fit in unless you're wearing the uniform. But all joking aside, you're absolutely right. It is that risk. It's the risk of being different, of not fitting in, of not belonging somewhere. That is a brave step to take, to be different, because people don't like that. you know, look, I mean, there's enough blooming TikTok videos out there about how you can all look exactly the same, and this is what you need to do in order to be perfect. And, you know, I wrote something in response to someone's post this morning, and sort of said, you know, when are we going to realize that we are all perfectly imperfect, just as we are, and that's absolutely fantastic, and we already belong right where we are.
Beauty of being human, isn't it? It's what makes
absolutely.
We're all little pieces of the puzzle. We all have unique gifts and talents to bring, and desires and passions to bring to the table. It's what makes us human. Why we're so obsessed with trying to be the same is beyond me. But yeah, and I think bringing a like Mark did. Let's talk micro again. And you know, if we all want to lead with quiet bravery in our lives, we have to learn to trust ourselves.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to do what's unfamiliar. We have to learn to regulate our emotions and our nervous system in order that we can feel safe, because we are safe, really. And fear is very clever. It turns up in all sorts of different disguises to hold us back and help us make excuses and build false narratives that stop us from moving forward. But really, one little step at a time. Let's admit life's uncertain, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I'm very conscious of time. So, final thoughts, guys. Mark, what does quiet bravery look like in your life right now? What are you being quietly brave about?
Pretending I like having a dog. No, I can't say that. Joking. A puppy takes an awful lot of time. I didn't realize. It's a good question, right? Where are you being quietly brave? And I think for me, if I look at the last few months of my life, right, and I look at my daughters, and they're both teenagers now, and it's requiring me to be new and to be different. And it's requiring me to not be the dad of little kids and trying to have jokes and trying to do this, and kind of going, okay, I'm a dad of young adults, young girls who are becoming, especially the elder ones, becoming young women. And it's hard for me on this micro level to not be jokey and not be, you know, trying to take the piss a bit and have the crack, as opposed to going, okay, you're an adult too. Okay, where are you? How are you? What's going on for you? You know, and I realize how much I'm having to learn in that space. And I think what drives me in that is a fear. But the fear is a fear that I'm using to drive me rather than to hold me back. It's the fear of not connecting, so that I don't have a connection in a few years' time. And I'm looking at that and going, well, there's the reason why I have to be brave in the situation. I think maybe that's a thing for people. If you're wondering, where does bravery show up for you? And if you don't know where it's showing up for you, where is a fear that is something that you don't want to become a regret? And there's where you need to be brave.
Yeah, I love that, Mark. And so I think I'm going to conclude tonight that bravery is working with fear and not against it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dan. You know, I think it's that whole thing for me is, you know, shouting, it doesn't change things. You know, we don't have to shout to be brave, to step into that space. I think we just have to be steady enough to be standing in our own truth and to trust ourselves that we are, as I say, perfect just the way we are, and we are capable. And that does mean we have to confront some of those fears. But surely the risk of not doing that is so much worse. As ever, amazing, guys. Thank you for those for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Thanks all.